Welcome to this week's episode of Paranormal United States. This is episode 24, Mississippi. Take it away, Greg.
Thank you, Ash. So this week, in this episode, we're going to be talking about the oldest structure in a very old river port in the city of Natchez. It's called the King's Tavern building, and it's 237 years old. It got its start during a time of the Spanish settlement back in the 1700s. And around 1769, when the British moved in and established Fort Panmure, the King's Tavern building was originally built to be a blockhouse for the fort, as you can see in the background. As there was no sawmill near the frontier town, this building and other structures were constructed using beams taken from scrapped New Orleans sailing ships and were brought here to Natchez via mule. So it's quite a rich sort of history even before we've got into the story, and it does look like a bit of a weird building, to be fair. So it's an old town. There was lots of mercenaries, people coming round, and ne'er-to-do people, drunkards, and there was some outlaws called the Harp Brothers. They were infamous for being quite sadistic, and they took delight in torturing, mutilating, and finally killing their victims. And the very pleasant guys. The Hart Brothers, as well as other such men, would then return to Natchez after doing their dirty deeds everywhere, and come back and spend their money, stimulate the economy, and stay at the King's Tavern. It was also a notorious area for being a haven for people of questionable character. So, as you can see, the building's a bit odd looking. It does look a bit old. These guys used to go out of town, come back into town, spend all their money, and generally be a pain in the arse to all the locals. So over the years,
people like that.
Yes, same. Over the years, though, there were times when it changed hands, other families. It was like a private dwelling. It became like a bed and breakfast. Went back to being a hotel and a tavern. And in 1973, the building was sold, and eventually it then became a tavern again and a restaurant to serve both locals and visitors. And it took its original name again, the King's Tavern, and opened to both the living and also the entities which had stayed there over the couple of hundred years.
Cool.
So, one of the first killings on site, one of the Hart brothers, known as Big Harp, was staying at the tavern, paying for it with some money that he stole from one of his victims. A mother with a fussy baby was staying in the attic room, just at the top there, trying to quiet the child. Big Harp swaggered from the tavern area, absolutely hammered, went up to the attic room, grabbed the baby, he swung the child by its feet, smashed it hard against the brick wall, killing it. He then returned to the bar and bought another drink. Complete arsehole.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not much to say to that.
No, there's nothing else I can add to that. He's a horrible person, and that just proves it. So that's just one of the stories I'm just going to cover off about the deaths that occurred, and that's quite a traumatic death. And as you know, after we do some of the podcast episodes, traumatic deaths tend to lend weight to more paranormal activity. So the next one, sometimes being wealthy, prominent, and a well-liked person can give one the false impression that you can get away with anything. I mean, if you're a politician in the UK, you can have parties during lockdown and get away with it.
Not pay tax.
Or not pay tax. Yeah, that's a whole other thing that's come out today. So Richard and his wife fell into that trap. Richard King, King's Tavern, had hired a pretty 16-year-old girl to be a server called Madeline, a beautiful, engaging young woman who caught the attention of Richard. You can see where this is going. Forgetting his wedding vows, Richard seduced Madeline because he wanted her. Madeline gladly became his mistress in a hot, passionate affair. Story doesn't end there, and doesn't end well, unfortunately. So the
Oh,
stately Mrs. King found out about this illicit love. She decided to hire some thugs from Natchez to stab Madeline. Or perhaps she killed Madeline herself. Madeline was made to go away without a trace. While she didn't get a cement kimono or go to sleep with the fishes, Mrs. King or the men who killed her took Madeline's body and bricked them up in the chimney wall in the main room of the tavern to hide the
wow.
evil deed. Yep. So, during the 1930s, so we're fast forwarding a couple of hundred years, a family called the Portsmouth family needed to do some reservations to shore up the building. While repairing the chimney and fireplace in the main room of the tavern, 3 mummified bodies of 1 girl and 2 men were found. One of them is believed to be Madeline. The murder weapon, a dagger, was also found in another fireplace in another room. And the 2 men, many theories abound about who they are, slaves, servants or tavern guests who annoyed Mrs. King in some manner, prompted her to kill them. Maybe it was boatmen, maybe it was travellers, but they may have been killed by the same men who killed Madeline around the same time.
They wanted to add to their collection in the wall of bodies.
Yeah,
That's mad.
so it's got a whiff of Fred West about it, hasn't it?
Well, should have had a whiff as well.
Yeah,
On them
yeah.
bodies.
But that's what I don't get. I mean, I've never smelled a dead body, but I understand that they don't smell particularly nice. So you'd think after a certain amount of time, people would think, "What the hell is that smell?" But I don't know. So, although the bodies were found in the chimney wall, they were respectfully buried properly. But apparently, this discovery awakened some entities as well as other restless spirits who had been quiet up until this point in time, but became active because of the renovations of the tavern. Shadowy forms have been seen passing right through the stairways. The fireplace where the bodies were found would emit heat as if it had been burning wood, although it isn't used by the living to do so anymore. A woman's footprints can be seen on freshly mopped floors, and imagine the fright that this woman's footprints gave one employee when he saw her footprints coming towards him across the wet floor.
Wow.
So this is like something out of a horror film.
Yeah.
And not a nice horror film. An apparition of a young woman has appeared in front of guests and staff as well. They've named her Madeline for obvious reasons, and Madeline likes to play jokes on the staff and visitors. She likes to knock jam jars off the shelves, pours water from the ceiling and onto the floor. She likes to make chairs rock that are hanging on the wall. Hard to open doors will suddenly open by themselves. When a staff member calls her name, the door shuts again by itself, and she likes to turn faucets and lights on and off. An EVP of a woman has also been made in one of the empty bedrooms by a news camera crew from the local town. Now, I haven't been able to find that particular EVP, but I have got an EVP that has been recorded by a paranormal team investigating there.
Oh, interesting.
Should we do the clip again?
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely hear something. Could be help.
So yeah, that's the EVP. It is very faint, and it says the word help. There, I couldn't find the news clip one, but I could find this one, where a paranormal group has been out there and done some investigations. So let me know what you think, guys. So an entity of a man with a top hat has been described as sinister, has appeared to the living. He could be a murder victim. Maybe he was one of the outlaws himself. People don't know. Waiters and waitresses feel like he has an evil presence. So, perhaps he's just angry for being killed. He might have died traumatically. as we mentioned, that does tend to stir up a bit of paranormal activity. He's also seen wearing a dark jacket, dark trousers, and a black tie string. Sometimes he appears behind people getting their picture taken by the fireplace where the bodies were found. Dishes have been thrown around in an aggressive manner, not in Madeline's style of mischief making, but quite aggressive. People have felt tightness in their necks and shoulders and pressures on their chest. And in the mirror in one of the upstairs bedrooms, the face of a man is seen briefly every now and again. The King's Tavern was featured. Yeah, it does seem like it's got quite a lot of activity. And in August 2012, an episode of a program called Haunted Collector, the tavern keeper at the time, Tom, shared stories collected from staff and guests who claimed that they heard a baby crying when there were no children around. Some had their hair pulled or were pushed, and physical activity was sometimes bad enough to leave bruises. Women have also reported being mysteriously locked in the bedroom. And that is the King's Tavern, the oldest building and structure in Natchez in Mississippi.
Definitely very busy.
Definitely busy.
And it's quite cool, like it's made out of like repurposed timber from the boats and stuff. That's really, really cool as well.
And you don't know if some of those ships where they've sunk previously or have had sort of trauma in there, whether or not that sort of residual energy has come across and not helped matters. But the Hart brothers and these outlaws that have tortured people, if they've died sort of in the property or around the property, that's the kind of place that they would haunt as well and be arseholes in the afterlife as they were in the living life. So
sounds like it could be.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us on episode 24, Mississippi.